Woohoo! Yeah. Woo! Kia ora. Kia ora. Welcome back. That's a, man, I've heard jazz described as melancholic before, and it's weird because in that it's nice and smooth. It's the stuff that plays in the back of coffee shops and all that. But if you do think about, there's like an underlying sense of sadness, like, I don't know what the sadness is, but sometimes you do get that feeling, it's almost got that undertone of like, yeah, cool, everything's all vibing and jazz and whatnot, but underneath, like it's built on top of a foundation of sadness, and I don't know what that sadness is, but I don't know, it's the feeling that I get anytime that I listen to jazz, and it's probably the beautiful part, and the reason why, you could be listening to it and you're like, this is pleasant, but there's a part of you that wants to cry, or maybe that's just a part of me. No mai hoki mai to another episode of the Sick As podcast, and I honestly forgot that I even needed to record this, and I had been sitting on this material for a while, and I think it's about time that I put it out there. But you would have seen on the Instagram, if you are following the Instagram, that I did a call for metaphors to do with fire, and this came up because, people described me in the last couple as getting a bit fired up. And I started thinking, there's actually quite a few metaphors when it comes to fire and different things that we talk about when we are ascribing fire, or when we're describing fire as well. So that's something that I wanted to get into today, is the metaphors for fire and what it means to me, but also what it's meant to a whole bunch of other people as well. So I'm happy to get into that. If you've ever seen the cheerleading movie Fired Up, it's almost like a spoof parody of Bring It On, but it's about these two dudes who, want to go to this cheer camp because, I won't give away too much of it, but there are some of the funniest lines on that movie. Like, I've referenced it so many times, but it seems to be one of those movies that no one's really seen. But there's a part in it where they go, give me an F, give me a U, what does that spell? Fired up. And they go like that. And there's parts in movies that you see and you're just like, not quite, like that doesn't add up. But the cool thing about this movie is that they were pointing out kind of all the silly things that happen in those sorts of movies. So anyway, I appreciated that, and I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. Let's get into the episode. Alright, let's do this. So when I wrote to everyone just to see, like, when you're thinking about fire, what are the types of things that you come up with, and there were quite a few that came through. Some of them were to do with song lyrics. So of note would be Johnny Cash, Burning Ring of Fire, so describing love as fire, and I guess that's that passion, that's that desire that different people talked about as well. We also would say that if something is going good, you could be on fire, you're on a streak, like, shot 3 points in a row, absolutely on fire. Someone could be literally on fire, and you got to stop, drop, and roll. So that's the action that you would take if you were on fire. If you have a desire for something, you have a burning passion for something, you have a burning drive. But also, if you need to ask a question, so you have a desire to ask that question, I had a burning question. So it's to do with flame, but it's also to do with that, with the feeling that you'd get from a flame, right? It's a burning, it's a desire. But it's weird because, like, if you've ever burnt yourself, it's sore. It's really, really sore. So I don't know why that comes through. When we talk about your muscles burning as well, like, it's that feeling of something needs to happen or stop, or a new action needs to be taken, otherwise this is going to become too much. I do feel like that's where a lot of it has come from. And then on the other side, if you have that passion, but if you start to lose that flame, people will talk about, I don't know if you've seen Hocus Pocus, but I only just watched it recently as well, but I watched the second one, and basically they have to use this flame or a candle to actually bring them back to life. So, like, this is the flame, and that flame is almost like the modi that they have, and until that wick goes out, that's when, like, these witches will then go away. Sorry, I should have said that. They do a ritual, and that's another place where I see flame used a lot. People get burnt. This is probably olden times. I don't know if they do it. They do, kind of cremation. So different ceremonies where different things will happen, like you burn sage to get rid of different spirits. I do know that in our culture, so especially when we have family reunions or we have an area where family are gathered, so definitely for Christmas, at our family reunion, like I said, at my father's wedding, there were two different candles that we lit. There were the first, so we had a candle for the photos of each of the people who had passed, and then we kind of, brought their wairua to the occasion by lighting a candle for each of them. So we would just light it, and then they were there with us. So that's another thing to do with fire. My brother, his task was to light the unity candle at my dad's wedding. So that was to unite two different souls. So that was a flame that became the kind of centerpiece or the focal point of that unity. Another thing in terms of fire and changing the evolutionary process, I guess, and the easiest way to think about this is if you ever seen the SpongeGar and Patar SpongeBob episode where they discover fire and they decide that they can eat everything. Once they cook it, they can eat everything. And that fire literally changed everything about us because now we could start to chew different foods. And we start to grow because we're now getting different protein sources and we're getting different formulas, I guess, of the foods that we're getting. So chemical breakdowns of those foods. So, and I guess in the more literal sense, fire, when you talk about it, it's, what is it called? So if you're boiling water, for example, if you're using fire to boil water, there's a chemical gradient, I guess, that it creates, and that's why things start to bubble, fizz, and then get to a point where it boils and then could evaporate if it goes too hot as well. So I think those are the more literal things, and some of the more beautiful things that people brought up when they were writing, and these are ones that I really wanted to bring up, is so it reminds some people of the lizard from Frozen 2, that one that kind of goes, and it is true, flame, if you follow the flame, it can warn you of different places where it can warn you of different things that are to come. We also say it's lit if something's going really, really good, and that's literally the start of getting a flame. There's a Neo lyric, actually, Neo and Fabulous. I forgot what the song's called, but he says, no, hold on, that's to do with force, not fire. Sorry, I take that back. But it's a really cool lyric. Movement by myself, force when we're together. It's like there are little sparks when things are by themselves, but it's a whole flame when you actually start to get the proper environment to be able to cultivate the flame that comes as well. So that's a new thing as well. That wasn't a Neo lyric, but if he wants to turn that into a song, all for it. We have this one here. It's new life, new beginnings, new thoughts, and brainwaves. So when people think about fire and flames, that's what they're thinking about, and that's a metaphor for new life and new flame. New beginnings, and that's interesting, because sometimes you can burn away the old thoughts, and actually back in the day, for the tangihanga that we would have, they had a separate house where a lot of the stuff would get burnt down, just because of the tapu that was part of it, and that, you would literally burn it so that it got rid of all the bad stuff that was with it as well. Some people say red. It reminds them of red. Mongrel mob, the colour, red as a person, maybe, who knows, but that's something that it evokes in them. Warm, so we have mahana. We're starting to feel that, when you think of a flame, you think of the warmth that it produces as well. Could that be a place of comfort? You don't get too close though, because then you get burnt, and I've heard that before. And especially if you start to think about that fella who got too close to the sun because he was flying, and his name starts with, he got those wings and then he got burnt. Oh, this is going to kill me. It's going to kill all of you listening into this being like, I know who that is. Anyway, I will look that up at some point, but that is bad. How can I not think of this? Hold on, let me type this in. Man who got too close to sun. And his name was Icarus. Icarus got too close to the sun. And that's just like, sometimes if you get that little bit of power, I guess, you get that flame and you get that ignition within you, that things are just going to go, get better and better because you're getting higher and higher. But then you get too far and too close to it, and then it ends up burning you. My iwi, Te Aupōuri, smoke and flame, and that one actually has a deeper meaning. So I was just like, wow, that's beautiful. What does that actually mean? And to their understanding, so this is to their understanding and how they have framed it for themselves. So if anyone is from there or knows the whakapapa of this, like, this is not for you to go at them. but they're just saying that my understanding is Opodi means dark, Podi, smoke, and it came about during an event that took place long ago in the far north. A huge fire was lit that covered this harbour in thick dark smoke, and the iwi used that as a cover to escape and head further north to where they are settled. Most people in the far, far north often relate smoke, fire, flames with our iwi. And this is what I mean. Pūrākau stories of what what this means to you. So we understand the world based on what we have been exposed to, based on the stories that we've been told, and how we're conditioned and how we're socialized. So all of this stuff is extremely important, and I think the more that people try to suppress each other, and I think this is something, and this is how I know colonization is definitely working, and here I go, getting all fired up again, fire, is where we as Māori will start to tell our own stories, and we will happily take on Pākehā worldview with the stupid stories that they tell sometimes. No, I'm not saying stupid stories as in they're all stupid, but some of them, when we tell what you would call myths and legends, which are actually just stories, everyone starts to question the validity of these stories. They say that wouldn't be true. Yet, we think about reindeers pulling a big guy in a red suit. And I'm not talking about reindeers pulling a bunch of mongrel mob people. I'm talking about, all these different things that we buy into, that we sell, that we buy into because of, this mythical thing that we apparently take as true. A bunny rabbit that lays chocolate eggs, and no one bats an eye. But when it comes to, oh no, hold on, so this island was fished up by one of our gods, everyone wants to pull something. And then we talk about this story about the fire, and then some people will start to say, oh no, but fire doesn't leave smoke, blah, 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 something like that. I'm not saying that that's happened, but this is how I know that colonization has worked, because it puts us against each other, and then we never progress, and we just stay in this constant tension rather than going to solutions that are actually going to help us move forward. That is an aside, but this is what I mean when I get fired up. All right, so another one, someone said a passion for something or setting a fire in your soul, and I love it when people talk about the deeper levels of who you are. So get into your soul, get into your wairua, get into that part within you that you can't describe. Because I think, and this is something that I want to talk about in a future episode, I think we kind of try to place an anatomical location within your body of where emotions are. So like we've separated the head from the body, and we've separated the body from your spirit, where a lot of the emotions that we feel, where do they actually set in your body? That's where you can start to feel it, but where are they actually coming from? And I think if we talk about your soul, that's something that it's not a part in your body, it's just your entire being. Which is a little bit different from how we've conceptualized emotions, which apparently come from your head. So that's awesome. That's where there's a flame in you that goes off, and that's what decides to start some of the actions that you have. It's the catalyst for those actions. We have someone here. This is awesome. See, this is what I mean. Aries. My star sign, also how their star sign, and also how hot-headed I can be sometimes. Now, we're talking about flames. In most instances, we've talked about them as good things, but now we're actually talking about the heat of the moment that can take you to some sort of anger. And those are all beautiful. And then my favorite ones that came in, because this was the first thing that I think about, it's actually a couple of things that I think about, but this is to do with Mahuika. And Mahuika is Maui's grandmother, who is also known as like the goddess of fire. So she has different flame on. No, what does she do? So she doesn't click her fingers together like flame on, but she actually has her matikuku, which are her fingernails. Each of them are good for fire. So I'll tell that story shortly, but why this actually came up. So yes, I am getting fired up, but as you would know, the last solo episode, I talked about this dream that I had where my auntie took me back, and I've started to see my maunga, my awa, and my marae just more, and I'm thinking it is a calling home, and a lot of things are starting to make sense. And then I started getting nervous about if I was to go home because of how long it has been since I've been back, and I started thinking about the notion of kāinga, because in that episode that I did with Baskets of Knowledge, and that's when I talked about ngā kete o te wānanga, they asked me a question. One of the first questions that they asked me is, where do you consider home? And then I started thinking, how I answered it was where I go back and it feels comfortable when I do go back. But I guess the truth is I haven't actually been home for a very, very, very long time. And if you look at the word home in Māori, it's made up of kainga. So kainga, it's somewhere where the home fires burn. So it's like ka, so where the ahi ka roa is. And ahi ka roa is where your home fires burn. And what's that part of you that kind of makes you feel like when you get home, it's warm, it's comfortable, and you are part of it all. So a saying that I remember when I was coming through my degree, and it's to do with kind of like anything that ignites a flame within you to like keep, if you stay close to it in terms of like your expertise, or if you're talking about any skill that you want to get good at, you need to be close to it. You need to be within it, and you need to be immersed within it, or very, very close to being immersed within it, so that that flame can keep growing in you. It's like anything, it needs to catch, and then it needs to be fed over time. So I remember it was takuahi tawhiti. So if I'm takuahi tawhiti. So if I'm close to my flame, takumata ki poro. So my spear will get blunt. If I'm far away from my I fully just stuffed that up. Let me go back. Takuahi tawhiti. So if I am far away, tawhiti. If I'm far away from my flame, my spear will get blunt. Takuahi tūtata, takumata ki koa. So if I am close to my flame, then it will be sharp. So I think that's really specifically to do with actually making spears and making weapons and using that flame. So if you think about on Thor, where he goes back, and actually Lord of the Rings does it as well, where they just have all that molten lava. It's just, I don't even know if it's lava, but it's super hot, and they're making all their spears and stuff. So you need to be close to that flame to be able to keep your weapon sharp, and that can be to do with any skill or anything that you want to be doing. And why I'm bringing this up now and why the story is going to be so important is because this reminds me of, just kind of where I'm at with my relation to home. And I think that's why, because I've been away so long, I got so used to being cold. Literally, I'm in Dunedin, but I've got so used to this feeling that I don't actually know how warm it is when I do get home, and then I don't think you notice how cold you are until you get home. So there's been times where, I do remember the last times that I have been home, and when I am there, it's this feeling of just like your feelings, everything just clicks. You're always like, why has it been so long? Once you start saying those things, that is kind of, I think it's a sign to you that you have been away too long and that you haven't restored those fires, and that your fires are actually going out. And, it's just like anything. It's koniahi is where kind of like it's someone who is drawn to the fire. So you feel that flame, and then you get closer to it, and then that heat is what brings other things into it as well. So once you feel that, it's something that draws attention to it. So if you think about that, and if you think about the three different levels of maintaining those fires, and this is like in a literal sense, but also in a figurative sense of how long or how often it is till you go home. So there's ahika, which I spoke about before. That's where they're stoked. The fire's stoked, literally. The fires are burning, they're going, everyone's having a good time, could have a great bonfire. Then there's the next level, which is ahiteretere, or sometimes people refer to it as like mahana, which is, they're there. They could be there, they're reignited every now and then, and you go back and forth. So sometimes, I think in most cases, this would be people who move elsewhere, and then they're doing their job somewhere else, and then they go away, and then they come back every now and then. And then there is ahimatao, which I think is probably where I'm at, and this is why I had this coldness in me to, have this and get to that point where I'm so emotional about wanting to go back, because I realize this is something that I need to do. And I think that this is a hang up that a lot of people are going to have when they need to go home, is that I have been away for so long, I'm going to go back and no one's going to recognize me, or they're not going to welcome me. The only thing is that part needs to be kind of squashed, because you're always welcome home. If that is your home, if those are your people, they will always welcome you back. So yes, it's going to be cold when you get there. Yes, you're going to have to do quite a bit to be able to like remind them of who you are. But I think that if we all get that fire going again, just like anything that you do, you can stay close to it. And I think that it's almost one of the most healthy things for a lot of people. And this is another aspect of colonization that a lot of people, will kind of overlook, is that belonging, that feeling of having a home. So of course, having that belonging in terms of sense of identity and being able to be who you are, a lot of that is to do with knowing where you're from. And kind of displacement and how we look at, where people can afford to live and all that sort of stuff. That's going to displace people and take people away from the stories, the spiritual kind of connections that their ancestors and all the people who have gone before them, their footprints, their legacy that they've left in different parts of the land. That I believe land is like a USB and it remembers everything that we do. So every time you're walking on different spots, it's a literal footprint, and that's where a lot of legacy before you is, and that's where a lot of the Modi, or the part of you that feels lost, can be restored. That's just a thought. That's just a thought. Anyway, so let me tell you this quick ass story. So, this is where Maui, and before I keep going, a lot of people love Moana. I hated Moana. For the sole reason that The Rock was horrible as Maui, and I think I might have said this before, but Maui was one of my heroes growing up, and I held him in such high regard. But the way that The Rock played his character, and I'm not sure if it's The Rock's fault or anything, but he just played him like a goof, and he just looked stupid. And maybe this is a Pacific version of Maui, because everyone has a Maui, right? This is the Maori version of Maui that I'm talking about, but maybe in their stories of him, that's how he was, or they just wanted to make him more Disney-fied so that he could be cool. But Maui was a bad motherfucker, and he was doing some cool ass shit that The Rock, or the Disney version of him, just like could not live up to. They made him more soft and made him more like silly and scared and all that sort of stuff. But he was the most inquisitive, most creative, and most boundary pushing person who just actually allowed the world a lot of gifts because of his ability and his inquisitive mind. So this is where it all starts. So so when I talk about fire, our understanding of fire came from the story of Maui and Mahuika. What happened was, Maui was just chilling out one day. He's looking at the flame, and this is something that I do. So it's been cold as freak the last couple of weeks with the snow and whatnot. I started lighting fires, and there's just something about fire. You just look at it, and you're just like, wow, that's cool. And I can look at it for just a long time and just not think about anything. But I guess that's the same feeling that Maui had when he was looking at the flame as well. When he was looking at it, his mum saw him, and he's just kind of chilling. He's just like, oh, wow. And then he had that look on his face, that look that if you have children or if you've been around children, they get that look of like, I'm going to do something. And I don't know if it's going to be good or not, but I'm going to do something. Once parents pick that up, they clamp onto it very quickly. And she asks, oh, no, Maui, what's going on in your head? And he said, nothing. But then he, comes back and he's like, actually, where does flame come from? And how do you make fire? And then it just basically got to a point where his mum's like, oh no, okay. So she tells him about Mahuika. Mahuika is his grandmother, who has this huge mystique about her, right? Everyone in the village knows she's kind of scary. She has a history that precedes her, and people just like, don't bother Mahuika, right? She's got flame on, and she can turn you into barbecue real quick. But anyway, this doesn't worry Maui at all. Maui's been through thousands of feats, and everyone knows what he's capable of, and he's into his inquisitive period already. Now, he wants to know the nature of fire and how fire can actually be created. The only thing is, in these times, because they were nomadic, they kind of had to realize, keep flame going. So they either had the flames that were in the village, so they had the fires that they had going on at their houses, or the communal fires as well. But they would also have these things where it's called a ahikomo, and that's where they would go get the embers. So it's kind of like this huge thing that could keep embers going for, and it'll just burn for like a couple of months at a time. And that's where they'd go get a little bit to fire, and then they can take it back to their house. Now, obviously, because they have all of that stuff, they're not going to need to go see Mahuika because they have fire that's already burning. So, how do you get around that? How do you actually have to go visit Mahuika? You put them all out. So overnight, Maui puts them out, puts out all the house fires, also douses the ahikomo in water as well, and then that's all gone. Oh no, who put out all the fires? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Now we need to go to Mahuika to be able to reignite those flames. Who's going to go? Maui is going to go. Maui goes on his mission. Everyone's telling him, like, watch out, she cray. And he's just like, no, it's all good. So he's not really taking anything into consideration right now because he's Maui. He wants to go figure out what's happening. He then gets to the foot of the cave. Mahuika's just like, whoa there, who's that? I don't know why that voice came out, but, who's that? He goes in. He's a little bit scared. He starts to like, oh, yeah, she's kind of old. She kind of do be scary. And then he sees what he needed to see. And that was her matikuku, which is just like all flame on going on right now. Okay, so she's got 10 of these beautiful nails that each have flames. So these are the source of the flame. He asked for them. He's just like, oh, man, things be tripping, things be tough back where I'm from. We don't have any fire. We can't cook. We can't do any of these things. It's getting cold. So she then decides, okay, I'll give you this one, but please look after it. She dabs it out a little bit, gives it to him. It's kind of like an ember. He takes it. Now his dumbass, not actually dumbass, his tutu mind, I guess, then's like, I wonder, I don't know why, but I'm going to throw this into the stream. Puts it out, goes back in, asks for another one. And he's coming up with excuses like, oh, when I went out there, it started raining just on me, and then it went out. Can I have another one? She then gives him another one. And then as he keeps going, he finds more and more excuses. He's just throwing them into the stream. Then he goes back in. She's like, what the heck? Where did that one go? And then she gets more and more reluctant. And then she gets down to her final nail. And she's pissed. She is pissed. She doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. So she just absolutely rages. Turns around, lifts her front foot up, cocks it back. It's almost like she's going to do a baseball pitch. Rips that last one. He's out of here. He's running. It's coming after him. Flame on all the way down to everywhere that he's going. He turns himself into a fish because we know he can do that. Goes underwater. Oh, damn, hot as heck. And then he probably turned himself into a bird as well. He started flying away. I think he flew away first, sorry. And then like his feathers start to catch on fire. He's like, oh no, this is not good. Turns himself into a fish. Goes under, but the water's starting to boil. And then Tawhiri Matea, just like he doesn't get as much rep as he should, but Tawhiri then, does a storm, does his karakia, rains down to douse everything as well. Now, that, I think, teaches us a bit. We know where fire comes from, but also not to piss your nan off, and also not to be wasteful of when you are given a good gift. But that's not what I'm trying to say. We learn from that as well that you get I think it's the Kaikomako tree is where he then found the embers or where he found the flame. So then he learnt from that if you rub two of those sticks together, you can make fire. So you learn almost like the origin of where fire comes from that story. But it's kind of, there's multiple things that come from that. It's in terms of like being able to find what makes you ignite and what makes you, I think this is my taking from it anyway. This was a journal that I used to write when I was in my teens, but from that, what I took away is, not only to respect your elders, but also, and not be wasteful, but also knowing the source of your ignition, knowing the source of your fire, and knowing what makes you fired up, so that firstly you can understand, when you are starting to get fired up, but also understanding the mechanics of what makes you passionate about different things, and what you're actually passionate about, and, using that as your source rather than chasing other things that aren't necessarily for you. So that's my chat for today, and that's just another story. And I do know that a lot of you do like me telling these stories, and please do remember that everyone's stories are going to be slightly different depending on where you're from and depending on where you were educated. So these are the ones that we were told when we were at school. So that's kind of how I liken it, but also the messages that I think you take away. Maybe the key details might be slightly different, but for me, these are the key takeaways that I had. And from the storytelling, you might find other things that also resonate with you as well. And I don't want to do any disservice to a lot of the people who put a lot of stories, use a lot of pūrākau in what they do, and I don't want to disrespect them. So I'm just letting you know that this is how I remember the story being told, and this is how, those are the learnings that I took away from them as well. So I hope that you took some learnings away as well. I hope that this wasn't just a random, no, actually it was totally random, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Love you all. Thank you for being here.